and I wanted to have you on to discuss the reaction to this Apple study.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, I'd love to hear your initial thoughts because there's been a lot of talk about the study, and to me, it seems to really confirm much of what you've written previously.
Yeah.
But what do
Yeah.
you say?
I think I want to give a little bit of background here. So, of course, in 2022, ChatGPT made its entrance, and it was a large language model. And as we all know, it was trained on these huge data text databases, and it is a stochastic predictor of the next word in a sentence. And as such, by itself, not knowing what words mean or how words relate to the real world, it gave hilariously bad answers to a lot of questions. Like I remember some of the ones I asked were, is it safe to walk downstairs backwards if I close my eyes? And the answer was, it depends. Do you have a TV? And another one was, can I climb a rope faster if I hold my ears with my hands? And it said, I don't know, but it's worth a try. And it just is garbage. And I think we quickly realized, including the makers of these large language models, that scaling up was not going to solve the problem of really bad answers. And so instead, what they went to this post training. And so they tried to clean it up, put band-aids on the problems by finding questions that they gave bad answers to and teaching them to give good answers, better answers. And in my view, that's a very limited form of intelligence, following instructions. It's not thinking for yourself. It's just doing what somebody tells you to do. And then the latest variant is, like you say, large reasoning models. And again, like artificial intelligence, intelligence and reasoning are very pejorative here. It's they're used to sell products, not to really describe what's going on. And the idea is to take a task, not a simple task like what's the capital of California? I mean, that one you just go into your database of text and you find the answer. But these are reasoning questions. And so, for example, there's 100 items in a box. Half are circles, half are squares. Half the circles are blue, half are red. How many blue circles are there? And large language models often have trouble with questions like that. And so the idea was to break it up into steps, the same way you and I would solve the problem. We think first, there's 100 items, half are circles, so that's 50, and half the circles are blue, so that's 25. So there's 25 blue circles. And it sort of sounds like reasoning, but again, it's following instructions. And the question is whether that leads to intelligence in any meaningful sense of the word, like being able to figure out things for yourself and generalize ideas into other domains. And so what the Apple researchers did was they analyzed four different mathematical puzzles. And the reason they did puzzles was because you could scale them up to make them more or less complicated. And one of them was the Tower of Hanoi. And so that's the one where you've got a platform with three rods on it, and you have discs on the rods. And the discs are arranged like a pyramid. They have holes in the middle, and they sit on the rods like a pyramid, the smallest one on top and the largest on the bottom. And the challenge is to move that pyramid over to another rod. But the rules are you can only move one disc at a time, and you can never put a disc on another disc that's smaller than itself. You can only put it on a larger disc or on the platform. And it's a clever little puzzle and easily solved. But then you start making it complicated. Instead of 5 discs, you have 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10. And so the Apple researchers could make it more complicated to see how these so-called reasoning models do as problems get more complex. And another one was the river crossing problem, which is you got a farmer, and there's lots of variations of them. The one I like is you got a farmer, and he has a goat, a wolf, and a cabbage, and he has to get them across the river using a boat. But the boat can only carry the farmer and one other thing. And you can't leave the goat alone with the cabbage because it'll eat it. And you can't leave the goat alone with the fox or the wolf because the wolf will eat the goat. So how do you do that? And again, it's a little logic puzzle and you can figure out. And then you can make it more complicated by saying there's more than 3 things to get across the river, and the boat can carry more than 2 things, and so on and so forth. And so there are 4 of these puzzles, and they gave them to a bunch of purported large reasoning models, in particular DeepSeek and Claude, because DeepSeek and Claude have very parallel algorithms. One is a straightforward LLM with no quote unquote thinking, and the other one is an LLM with the reasoning thinking, and compare how they did. And as you said, they started out with very simple problems. And surprisingly, the LLMs, the large language models with no quote unquote reasoning, did better than the reasoning models. And then they went to more complicated questions, and the reasoning models, where you require several steps, and the reasoning models did better. But then you went to even more complicated problems, and they both completely collapsed. And they both scored 0%. And even when they gave them the algorithm, here's how you solve the Hanoi problem, here's how you solve the river crossing problem, they still couldn't figure out how to do it. And they're bumping up against the same problem, which is they're not really understanding what the problem is. They're just following directions, either stochastic parrots, like putting words together in plausible ways, or following the directions their trainers have told them. And they don't know how these words relate to the real world, and so they can't solve any kind of logical problems. So, for example, here's a problem I gave a while back. I just gave it yesterday. I gave it to Claude and also to DeepSeek's so-called reasoning problems. I call it rotational tic-tac-toe, 90-degree rotational tic-tac-toe. And so here's the thing. I have a new game, a variation on tic-tac-toe. I'm going to take the 3 by 3 grid and rotate it 90 degrees to the right. And it does nothing at all, right?
Right.
You and I, we know what a tic-tac-toe grid is. We know it doesn't change the look of it, doesn't change the play, it changes nothing. And these reasoning models, they go on for hundreds of words talking about what a clever, I mean, they're always very optimistic and, very supportive and sycophantic. What a great idea. What a beautiful idea. Blah, 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 blah. And then I ask them, do you think it'd be better if I rotate it to the 90 degrees to the right or 90 degrees to the left? And they come back with these blah, blah, blah answers. And they always conclude 90 degrees to the left is better than 90 degrees to the right for some unknown, unknown reason. And it's because they're not thinking, they're not really reasoning. They're just either following instructions or they're using their stochastic parrot policies.
Hey, Detoxers. Thanks for tuning in to the Disinfo Detox. If you're enjoying the content, head over to nolanhigdon.substack.com for full access to the podcast as well as other original essays. Want to support the Detox? Consider becoming a paid subscriber. You'll get early and exclusive access to interviews, podcasts, essays, and more. If a subscription's not in the cards for you right now, no worries. Just like, share, subscribe, comment, and follow. It helps grow the audience and spread the word. Until next time, stay sharp, stay skeptical, and keep detoxing the disinfo.
rioting?
I don't know. I was paid to be here, and I just want to destroy stuff.
Is what you are doing illegal?
Well, these are peaceful protests. Even that guy over there says so.